In the last video, we talked about how we wish democracy worked, which was perhaps a folk theory of democracy updated with a little political psychology. In this video, we will discuss how it works in reality. First of all, let's break down the populace into three groups. We have 15% that are irrationally knowledgeable, and international studies show that to be largely global. We talked about flat earthers, or the irrational Illuminati, but not in great detail. In the US, at least, there is good evidence that the flat earthers are at about 20% of the populace. Perhaps Jimmy Kimmel said it best.
I feel like 1 in 5 Americans believe pretty much everything. 1 in 5 Americans believe there were microchips in vaccines. 1 in 5 Americans believe QAnon. 1 in 5 Americans believed Obama wasn't born here. 4 out of 5 dentists recommend sugarless gum to their patients who chew gum. And you know what that means? 1 out of 5 dentists don't.
So MAGA has a cult feel to it, and cultists are not crazy all the time, just when they're members of a cult. So that said, the core crazies that will believe anything at the drop of a video, at least in the United States and at the present time, seem to be around 20%. That covers about 35% of the population. That leaves us with 65% that are mostly rational humans, but largely uninformed about policy. We do know that in aggregate, worldview, whether liberal or conservative, has very little impact on voting patterns. It makes sense to think that worldview would have a strong impact on the knowledgeable voters and no impact on flat earthers. Knowledgeable voters will have a pretty clear idea of the entire platform of competing parties over several voting cycles or even decades. With that clarity, they will have chosen a party that expresses their core preferences or ideology more consistently, regardless of the election cycle. Flat earthers don't really pay much attention beyond the eye-grabbing and titillating theory. Their core worldviews are not going to be influenced much when their world is being controlled by lizard men. Often they have contradictory beliefs anyway, like that a Jewish cabal controls all the voting results, and at the same time that Latin American communists control voting machines. So for the math to make any sense, we have to assume that the 65% of rationally uninformed are not influenced by worldview in any meaningful way. So what does influence them? We have already talked about retroactive voting, and we know how the economy shifts votes. But how do people vote when the economy, shark attacks, horrific weather is not a major factor? How do people vote when their emotions are not being pulled one way or the other? Democracy for Realists tackles this in the last chapters of the book by analyzing studies that look at identity, subculture, or tribal opinion. One study quoted in the book and done by Solomon Asch showed university students a graph with 3 lines and asked which is the closest in length to the reference line on the left. When asked alone, 99% got it right, and one assumes the other 1% were given appointments with an optometrist. But when asked after multiple fake participants unanimously gave the wrong answer, only 24% would always give the correct answer, and 75% would conform to majority opinion and give the wrong answer at least once. The fact is, we are social animals, and we are very adaptive to group opinion. This is the last element we're going to add to our theory of democracy, tribalism. The 65%, the uninformed, the group that have the numbers to choose the president of the republic, when not pushed by shark attacks, droughts, floods, or recessions, are mostly going to go with their tribe. A large group of them will be part of a political tribe due to their social upbringing in the same way as they've chosen a religious belief. Often it will mirror their parents' party, but sometimes it'll be the opposite and in reaction to their parents. A sizable chunk of them will be tribally agnostic. These are swing voters, and when they aren't feeling it, can be the ones that are still undecided on the morning of the election. Very specific issues become important to both groups, sometimes more than one. Abortion, Israel, human rights, immigration, climate change, economic inequality. Those issues may make them switch parties or entrench them in their chosen party. But something that we have learned is that once a voter starts to habitually vote for one party, the rest of the party platform is slowly adopted as they deepen their tribal affiliation. If a voter has developed a pattern of voting for one party already, any change will only be due to severe trauma, financial or otherwise, like a brother dying from fentanyl. Any voter that has avoided a pattern and is still agnostic will be able to switch vote up to the last day, depending on how their mood impacts retroactive voting. We could perhaps see the 65% as existing on a graph between partisan to the core and completely agnostic. On the one side are the voters that, while uninformed, believe pretty much everything their party tells them because their party is the source they trust the most. Each person came to be partisan in a different way, but it would be an earth-shaking development that would make them change now. On the other extreme would be the completely politically agnostic. They may remain unconvinced that there is any difference between the parties, or recognize the differences, but are not sure what good policy is anyway. They may prefer the Republican attitude towards taxation and the Democrat approach to LGBTQ. These are voters that can change their minds on the morning of the election. And between those two extremes is the entire 65%. That pretty much concludes our theory of democracy. It may not be the most elegant theory of democracy, but you have to confess, medical theory was much more elegant and simple when it was about bad blood and the cure was leeches. At the beginning of this series, we asked how democracy ensures the rule of the people, by the people, and for the people, and there really is no answer. There is no answer when the people's will is unknown to the majority of the people themselves. So, now armed with the working theory of democracy, I want to do two things before we move on. I want to take a look at the threat to democracy that Trump poses. Also, I want to take a quick look at the history of democracy because when we start talking about possible solutions, we're going to need common references to different things that have destroyed democracies in the past. I'll see you in the next video.